we are blessed that on the first day of satsang in this new center, Vijay is back with us. So, thanks Vijay, and please bless us and bless the center.
Namaste. Is this loud enough?
Yeah, this
Is it okay? Well, it's nice to be home. You know, when I came to Noida last September, and of course I've come on and off since 2005, 2006, but since moving here and getting to know you all more and going through, you know, new relationships, kind of the courtship, you know, and what's it really going to be like and how's it going to work? And I can just say that from my side, it's really been working wonderfully. And when I saw your smiles when, you know, in coming back, that I find that encouraging. So, I know many of you are interested in maybe to hear about my trip, having been gone for 6 weeks, but I'll mention a couple of things, but I would really, there's so many different entertaining things I can share that are really not, you know, a part of Sunday service. So I'd really like to share them later this afternoon. We'll talk about that during the announcements. The subject that I'd like to share today is cleanliness, holiness, practicality, and taking responsibility for Master's work in this lifetime. So, having spent a little over a year in India, since returning, and experiencing the Indian environment, and then I went to Thailand on my way to the U.S. And Thailand is really clean. I mean, seriously, I couldn't find garbage anywhere. I mean, a few little piles, but basically the place is spotless. And I thought, well, why is India different? You know, cleanliness is not about economy, it's about consciousness. In America, there have been many efforts over the years. They called them, in New York, I think it was, they called them the projects, and probably in Detroit, other cities. And lower income communities were torn down, and they built up these beautiful buildings, brand new buildings. And in 3 or 4 years, they were dilapidated again. Because the people living there couldn't maintain that consciousness of cleanliness. And of course, everybody blames somebody else. Well, it's the economy's fault, it's this fault. I can't afford to keep the place clean. That's just simply not true. Now, when I got to America, of course, America is almost in the middle. America's pretty clean. And of course, I'm generalizing, because there's plenty of places in America that are messy. And there's certainly probably places in Thailand that are messy too. I just didn't happen to see them. But I observed this. And then, of course, along the trip, I saw kind of, the airport, the U.S. airports, and then traveling up to, actually I went up to Tacoma, my daughter got married, And so I was in Tacoma area, which is really green. There's a lot of rain in that area. So super green, really, really very pleasant. And one of the few times I've been there when it wasn't raining. Usually it's raining in the Seattle area. And but it was just so fresh and clean. And I remember, and then of course I went to Noida, and I went to, at the village, I went then over the hill to Ayodhya to Crystal Hermitage, where Swamiji lived. And I spent a little bit of time in his, in the domes, the Crystal Hermitage, but also in his rooms, which are down below. And I had an experience there that reminded me of something that two other experiences I had many years ago. And these experiences had to do, well, maybe a fourth experience as I think about it. It has to do with the difference between, they say that cleanliness is next to godliness. But what does that really mean? You know, what does that really mean? I had this experience years ago. I was asked to, I was working at the meditation retreat, the old meditation retreat, and Swamiji was scheduled to give Kriya, but he didn't show up. And in those days, we didn't have phones. There was one phone there. I called down, couldn't find him. And then I actually, everybody was, you know, everyone dresses in white and they all come and meditate and they're all there. No Swami. So I drove the 3 miles down to the village and started hunting. And he was down in a small home right there near Master's Market in the village. And I knocked on the door and I went and said, "Oh, Vijay, listen. He was in tooth pain. He had some problems with his tooth, and the nerve was exposed, and he was in so much pain, he didn't know if he could do the Kriya. And they were trying to get in touch with a dentist, and he just didn't know what to do. This was like had never happened. I mean, it never happened that Swamiji wasn't, you know, up on his horse fighting the battle, you know? So he said, "Vijay, look, go back up to the meditation retreat and explain what's happening. And I'll send a message as soon as I know what's going to happen." And he said, go up there, lead some chanting, and then, wait till I send word. So, of course, I was in a hurry to get back up there because I knew all these people were waiting. So I start driving pretty fast on a very bumpy road. But I get there, and as soon as I'm walking down the path, and everybody is in the Temple of Leaves, which is under this huge oak tree, and it's a place that many satsangs and things have taken place there over the years. And so the thing is I came around the corner, and suddenly I was in the presence of this group of people. It's like I couldn't see them, but then I could not only see them, but I could feel them. And in that presence, I felt holiness. I felt the difference between just being clean. I mean, everybody was dressed up. That's clean. But there was something deeper than that taking place. It was a vibrational presence of spirit. This is the essence of holiness, is God. And this group of people had attuned to that. If Swamiji had been there, I might have thought that it was him that was somehow, or that it was Master. And of course, these things are not really separate. But nevertheless, sometimes you feel that this is where what I'm experiencing is coming from. And this group of people was radiating that energy. Well, I also experienced something similar to this. I was visiting Mount Washington, the SRF Mother Center, And at that time, we were allowed to, well, 2 times. One, of course, we were allowed to go in and visit Master's room, and his sitting room and his bedroom. But another time when I was there, I visited with the Durga Mata. One of the early sisters was there for so many years. And her room, I was with someone else, we sat in her room, and her room was like radiating. I mean, it was just vibrant. It was clean. I mean, it was like you couldn't find a speck of dust in that place. But there was something else going on as well. There was something going on that was holy, that was divine. And I felt that in Master's rooms. I remember feeling it in the Encinitas Hermitage, the Master's rooms at the Encinitas overlooking the ocean. And when I went back to the Crystal Hermitage, and of course this is the first time I've been there since Swamiji's passing, and there was nobody around. There was just one gal, there was 2 people there. One was upstairs, the other one was doing something. So I was basically alone. And I began to, you know, when you've been away from a place, you're open to a fresh feeling about it when you come back into it. Just like I feel today, coming back here to Noida. And so I opened myself up to that, and I got that feeling again. That feeling of cleanliness, that feeling of purity that we talk about. What is sadhana for? Purify our consciousness, so that we can go from not so clean to pure to holy. Yes? And this is a vibrational transformation. And so visiting the Crystal Hermitage was reminding, and this sort of connectedness in my mind, this sense that cleanliness and orderliness is an essential part of not only our outward lives, but our inward life. In the computer world, they say garbage in, garbage out. And you put garbage in, garbage comes out. That's the way it works. So when we put in uplifting vibrations, when we attune ourselves to all of those cleansing qualities of consciousness that we attune to in the spiritual life, this is good. This is what we want. This is going to take us from worldly consciousness to holiness. Many people say that the spiritual life is not practical. You can either be successful outwardly or you can be spiritual. You can't be both. But if you look at Ananda and all of Master's expressions out into the world in his lifetime, you see that just simply isn't true. That in fact, the most practical thing that you can do in life is to be in tune with God. Because God is the source of every kind of success. Every ability for anything to happen comes from God. It's all God. But we can't take advantage of that infinite potential if we dirty up our consciousness. Now, some years ago, Swamiji, he talked about this. I remember him talking about this in regards to the material success through Yoga Principles course, which later got changed to success and happiness through Yoga Principles, I think. But he was saying that he met a fellow who had a shop. And while he was in this shop in India, he had an idea that he thought might help the young man to be more successful in his business. So he made a suggestion, a very practical suggestion. And the fellow's responsible, thank you, it's kind of you to share. But you see, this is what my father did. And I've learned this from my father, and I'm going to continue to do it the same way that it's been done in the past. Now, part of us is going, good, he's honoring his father. He's honoring his education. He's honoring his history. But But on the other side is evolution. There is no way to stay the same. You either go forward or you go backward. This we know. The only thing that doesn't change is that everything changes. Yes, so when we think about how we're going to approach our lives in a way that's going to be most beneficial, we have to understand that we have to break new ground. We can't simply do it the way it used to be done. Because we don't even know how it was done before. We weren't there. We read books about it, we get stories about it, but the fact is that what happened in the past is dead to us unless we can tune into some universal aspect of it and therefore find the central truth of life. But well, for example, in the Gita, where it says that when darkness declines, and then I will reincarnate, God will reincarnate in form. Well, but if Ram was like perfect, wasn't he? Ram was like perfect. Well, why didn't he come back as Ram again? No, he came back as Krishna. You see? God doesn't come back the way it was who knows how long ago. God is ever new. Ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. Ever new wisdom. Ever new this creative evolution of expression. We have a challenge. And that challenge is to connect this idea of cleanliness, godliness, and practicality in this time and place. And in order to do this, we have to be strong enough to respect the past, but understand what we respect about the past is those divine principles, and then to manifest them in the best possible way that we can right here, right now. And we have been drawn into a spiritual family that has practicality as a very central part of its most basic teaching. There's nothing more practical than the practice of Kriya Yoga if you want to advance spiritually. And to live the Kriya Yoga lifestyle that goes with it in order to support that effort. And what is an essential part of the Kriya lifestyle? Practicality. We have to look at everything that we do and say, how does God want to manifest this in this moment? Now, it was a little fun. Abhishek said, when we were talking earlier, he said, and several people said how the energy that happened in order to move, today is our first service in the new ashram house, okay? So it took a lot of energy and creativity and determination and practicality to make this happen in a very short period of time. What is one of the most celebrated songs at Ananda is, one of them is, Many Hands Make a Miracle. We love this. Many hands make a miracle. Join hands together. Join hands that are clean, that are organized, that are practical, that are holy. When we do that, and Master, remember, what did Sri Teshwar have Master do right after giving him samadhi? He swept the porch. Master's nature was devotional. He was not practical by nature, but he became very practical under Sri Teshwar's tutelage. So now some people are going to wonder if I should have come back. So Dr. Jowriji and Triptiji, who lead the chanting so wonderfully, but I'm going to poke at them again, because this is a challenge for us. This is a challenge. See, I love it. I can just let it go and let it be the way it is. But if you remember in the autobiography of a yogi, Master was talking to Sri Teshwar, and Sri Teshwar said, "Excuse me, I've got to go correct the guy who's chanting wrong." They're off key. So Sri Teshwar stopped the cooking, and his part of it, and he went over and made sure that the chanting was going properly. And Master did the same thing. And I remember being in seclusion in Nishat Bagh in Kashmir with Swamiji. And I'm in my meditation room, happily chanting away. Next thing I know, he's walking in the door. Vijay, there's a wrong note in there. There's a wrong note in there. Now, he wouldn't have done that if there wasn't some purpose to it. He was making a point to me. And it was the way that he was trained. If we're going to share something that represents the masters, we have got to make it as correct as we can. But while I was in America, I also had the opportunity to lead the Sunday service or give the talk on Sunday in the Sacramento Center. Some of you may know that it was Nayaswami and myself who were sent in 1977 to Sacramento. We started the first Ananda Center that was not at Ananda Village, but away. And there was a woman at this Sunday service that I spoke at while I was in America, who knew me back from that time. And I have to admit, I didn't recognize her face anyway. But she said, yeah, I remember you so clearly. You kept telling us all not to point our feet toward the altar. Because nobody else wants to do, nobody wants to tell people that they've got to change what they're doing. Nobody wants to take responsibility for that. There's nothing but grief that comes from that, or potentially. But the other side of it, and I thought about, oh, so great. So here's a person whose best memory of me, who they've carried for 30 years or more, and he was bossing me about where to put my feet. That's not something that I would have, chosen to be the high point of our, relationship. So we have to be careful. We have to be incredibly careful. I had to come into this future of the work. I had a chance to sit down with Jyotish and Devi, who are the I want to say the top dogs, but that's probably not respectful enough. Sorry, guys. These are my dear friends since I came to Ananda, and they're basically taking on a job that can't be done, except that it has to be done. So they're doing their best. And but we were talking about how we were particularly talking at one point about ministerial training, and here is the thing. It's like you need to have continuity, but you don't want it to become a suppressive environment. You don't want it to be something that's forced. It's got to be something that you enter into. Look, there's if you were going to be in a play or in a dance performance, there would be a director, and the director guides you in how to make it look good and to coordinate it all. And yet there still has to be a spark of individual expression too. You just can't be a mannequin. You can't be a stiff soldier. You have to have both. And here in India, it's so sweet. I mean, as an American, we love this freedom, this sense of open devotion. Don't make a big deal out of little things. Just don't make a big deal out of it. It doesn't need to ruin your life. So I look at India and the lack of physical cleanliness, and I go, well, that doesn't need to ruin my life. But I get to make a choice about what I'm going to live in. How am I going to live? I don't have to change all of India, but I do have to change myself. I do have to set standards for myself. And this is what each and every one of us have been asked to do as disciples, to set standards about how we want to live. How clean do I want to be? How holy do I want to be? How practical do I want to be? How in tune with God's view of sharing these teachings do I want to be? And these are all questions that you can't say, this is right and this is wrong in every situation. But some of them are quite clear. Some of the situations are you do your best to replicate the very specific information, for example, that Master gave. When we teach Kriya, we teach it the way Master taught it to Swamiji. The way that Swamiji, over the years, understood it on deeper and deeper levels. But we have we don't want to be making this stuff up unless we really think that we're qualified. And that is one of the things that we don't realize that we're doing when we make changes ourselves, is that we are taking responsibility for those changes and the effects that they may have in the lives of others. And that's a much bigger responsibility than we might be realizing. We might not realize that like myself, this person who remembers me as the guy who said, don't point your feet towards the altar, which is a perfectly true teaching. You're not supposed to lie down and point your feet towards the altar. But then, of course, remember the story of, okay, well, that's not the one I was thinking of. But when the disciple saw that his guru with his feet on the altar, he says, well, just move my feet where there is no altar. And then, of course, every time he moved the feet, the altar was there. So these are the things that, how am I supposed to know what to do when you say it both ways? Yes, but nevertheless, we start with the simple. So in the most practical way, we say we don't lie down with our feet towards the altar. But we must understand the principle of why that would be, and then begin to honor that principle in a variety of ways according to the challenges that life brings us. And this is what I'm trying to talk about, is bringing in this very particular and practical and yet spontaneous and intuitively connected. They have to come together. And isn't this what Master said would happen? Western practicality with Eastern spirituality. This is what we've been given to do. So we need to, so when Abhishek said, well, it would be very different if I had been here. And it would have been. It doesn't mean it wasn't good the way it was. This is fabulous. This is really fabulous. But it would have been, I would have pushed you. I would have pushed you in this direction of practicality, of breaking the mold, of not doing it just the same way that you used to do it. We have to push forward. I have to push forward too. I have to swing your way while you swing my way. And when we say your way, my way, we're talking about attuning to Master's way. What is Master's way? And how can we blend together to create this thing that is not the young man saying, oh, this is how my father did it. We don't have to change the world, but we are being challenged to change ourselves. And we want to look at this consciously and say, okay, how can I do this the way Master, in the principles that Master taught? And the basic principles of the spiritual life work in every life circumstance. And when we learn them in these very practical circumstances, they empower our spiritual expansion. And if we don't learn them, it makes it more difficult to focus the energy when you have more energy. See, this is the thing. If I've never seen the firemen here in India. You know, there's so many cement buildings. In America, many of the buildings are wood. So there's a much higher danger that the building will catch on fire and burn down. And when they do, the firemen come with these hoses that one guy can't hold. The water is so powerful that one person simply cannot hold it. Well, so when the first day you become a fireman, they won't let you even try. You have to work your way up. I don't think they have little hoses. They might. But the point is that with a smaller amount of energy, you can begin to work with it, and then gradually you can have the pressure up higher and higher. And the basic principles that we're trying to learn in order to be inwardly holy are connected to all of these practical outward applications. So as we think about living in harmony with the path of self-realization, and as I was taking this journey and talking with Jyotish and Devi and realizing the challenge that we have, I mean, it's so easy when you got someone like Swami Kriyananda who's like, it's just like powers, I'm thinking of Superman, powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. It's humbling. And you realize that we cannot replicate that. But as a family, we can be inspired by it, and we can add each other up. Many hands make a miracle. We can make a miracle. This is a little miracle. But we can be part of that greater miracle, which is Master's vision, Master's prophecy of the joining of East and West. And Kriyanandaji's conviction that Ananda Sangha in India would be larger than as a group, larger than in any other country. How is that going to happen? But most importantly, it's not a question of size, it's a question of quality. And when you're still, this is 10 years in, we're still early. This is just the early stages of Ananda India. And in the early years, it's that foundational strength upon which other things can be grown. And without that foundational strength, the building won't stand for a long period of time. And the foundational strength of the Sangha comes in our individual attunement and our group attunement. They're tied together. And they include body, mind, emotion, and spirit. All of those levels. So, I'm thinking, and certainly we've seen during this last year, Ananda internationally has really experienced this surge of energy and enthusiasm, and doors have opened that had not opened in the past, and so we have every reason to believe that there is a divine wind trying to fill our sails, and that we have to open them. We have to open wide and be willing to fly with that wind. And so I'm sort of saying, let's do it. I have increased and freshened enthusiasm, and I feel like we can have a lot of fun together, that we can experience the bliss of discipleship, and that bliss can be a service to whoever God will share it with. And again, when we talk numbers, I get a little uncomfortable. Our goal is not to conquer the world. Our goal is to transform our hearts, and in that transformation, to help others to experience that transformation as well. So I say, it's great to be home. It's good to see your smiling faces. And I look forward to serving and praying and experiencing the blessings of the spiritual life with you all. Namaskar.